Paul, we're back. A little later than planned this week, but we've made it. How was your Sky weekend last week?
Seems like a while ago now. It was pretty average, I would say, which, like being in the position that I'm in, average is good, I think.
Yeah. So yeah. What any rank movement?
No rank movement. I got 104 points for the week.
Nice.
So some successes, some non-successes with Saka captaincy, but um, I was in the majority in terms of captain them anyway, so there was little ground lost from doing that. I didn't use any transfers as well, so it's always a success.
Nice. I only scored 99 this week. Well, I say only, it's obviously a decent score, but 99 this week. Saka captaincy was a bit of a bummer on it with the penalty. You do all the diligence, you look at all the factors, and then there's nothing really much you can do about that. And I think the disappointment from my week was Enzo Fernandez against Brighton, who just didn't look like he was going to get anything. Brighton just completely ran riot, and they were absolutely fantastic again. So I left him in last week. I didn't make any transfers last week, but I'm feeling I'm gonna open my purse this weekend to make a couple potentially. So we'll take a look. So I had a massive red arrow down from third to fourth, but still happy my team got a bit of a plan. I think moving forward, got captaincies covered, got in players nice and early and things. So still kind of reasonably happy and a good transfer account. So yeah, welcome everyone in the chat. Windy is in. 21st overall. Windy says, waving at you from the 21st rung. What is the view like from up there? Bloody nerve-wracking, I can tell you. It's nerve-wracking for me, never mind for Paul, who's currently first and second. Neil is in. Thanks for making the time to the pod this week. No worries. Apologies we couldn't do it on Monday. I was in Sheffield throwing orange dust all over the Crucible, and Paul was at a wedding, so that's why we didn't make it on Monday. We struggled a bit this week, but we finally got there in the end. Joseph Robinson is in. Simon Bates says, long-time listener, first time live, looking forward to being involved. Great to have you with us, Simon. And Peter Clinch, my old headmaster, says, good morning, sit up straight, boy. Apologies, Mr. Clinch. Gaz Byrne is in. Manchester. Colin Johnston, Jim Pro, Peter G, Ollie Poole, Glenn Murray. Glenn's on the Buckfast. He asked a question, is 11:30 too early for Buckfast? Probably, maybe in Wales, but definitely not in Scotland. David Back.
It's a Friday as well.
What's that?
It's a Friday. It's a Friday as
It
well.
is a Friday, of course. And the day ends in a Y as well for you guys. So yeah, it's perfect. David Baxter, flying high, right up our backsides, is in. Shane White is in, also having a stormer. Manchester is in. Dan says, first time watching live. Welcome, Dan. Matthew Samuel, Sparta, Sam Smith, Jason Harry. Dan Cox is in as well, as is FF Thinker. Welcome one. Welcome all. Let's take a look at the lay of the land for the next few weeks. The end of the season is in sight, Paul. Unbelievable. If you go on to either Ian Parrin's transfer planner for Hub members or onto FF Stuff, you don't have to scroll right anymore. The end of the season is here. It's in our crosshairs. So obviously looking at what is left on this schedule, Paul. What are the things that strike? I suppose the thing that strikes me first off is the middle of Sky Game Week 39. That kind of midweek one, we see a bit of a break in fixtures, and then for me it's that changeover to looking at it's when Man City, Brighton, and Man United in particular have those extra fixtures, and we'd really look to kind of shift over there. That's the one thing that strikes me looking at this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, 23 calendar days, so 23 captaincies from now to the end of the season. In my head, I'm splitting this into 4 small periods of time. So we've got this, where this like very, very small period of time where we've got this blank game week, we've got the doubles, we've got some resemblance of normality, and then we've got this double that leads into the flat game at the end of the season. So I'm almost thinking, how am I going to use my transfers over those periods? And I'm hoping to use none in the period where we've got that flat, no fixture gains really, in that third quarter, if you like. So where's opportunities in using them this week, this short period of time coming up with the blanks? where's the period where we can then hop back on the teams that double that had blanked. We get the fixture volumes there, knowing that there's a follow on to that as well. And then that last bit, how many do we really need for that last bit? Knowing we'll possibly already have our team set up, loaded with those players that have got extra fixtures anyway, because there is teams that double or double, like Brighton. So if we've already loaded up on them, are we really going to be wanting to take them out, bring them in? So lots of considerations on the transfer front there. I do think it's reasonably easier to navigate, but what does that mean if you're trying to gain rank or hold rank? Means two different things, right? If it's easy to navigate, it's easy to navigate for everyone. So if you're trying to gain rank, it's harder. But perhaps if you're trying to consolidate, it makes life a little bit easier.
I think it's easy in terms of navigating in terms of captaincy. Definitely, the single game days that are left are not too hard. Just looking forward a little bit. Everton, Leicester. Oh, excuse me. Everton, Leicester is probably the toughest one at the moment to navigate, but there are kind of hop-on points if you want to go on before there or go in on the evening. Arsenal and Chelsea, you would guess that most people will find it hard to get rid of all their Arsenal players. We'll touch on that next.
That's going to be interesting, that Arsenal-Chelsea game, because I think the sentiment up till probably last weekend, maybe a little bit before it, was we'll just keep Saka and we'll play all the way through. Yeah. But knowing that Martinelli's outscoring him most game weeks just now, and his ownership took a massive jump, as you say, we'll talk about that in the next slide. I think there's probably more people that's going to make an argument for keeping Martinelli. This leads into some of the questions that we've got in about budget as well.
So we've been working very hard behind the scenes. We've been trying to engineer my route through the next few games to kind of make sure you have all these covered. But like we say every week, things change so quickly, and whereas like Saka was the absolute go-to over Martinelli, that's maybe not the case anymore. And the $1.5 million difference and what that can do for your team in terms of maybe covering maybe getting in a Maddison, or maybe getting to like a Ruben Dias or a Van Dijk or a Trent or something like that is massive in it. So it's not as straightforward as it was. That's a really good point. The other game days, Brighton and United should be fairly easy for people to cover. Like most have got a Brighton player now, and Rashford will likely be back in the crosshairs. I noticed that 7% owned now, Rashford. He went down from, was it 91 or even higher potentially to 7%. So if anyone wants to jump back on him early, he could be a mega differential. The others after that, Leicester and Liverpool. Salah now 97% owned. They've got a lot of fixtures coming as well, so you would guess he'd be mega popular there. Newcastle and Brighton. Again, everyone will have a Brighton player or Newcastle. I'm just looking on a little bit. Monday the 22nd of May has been confirmed. Newcastle and Leicester. So I think Trippier is still 70-75% owned or something like that. So, but that's it really. In terms of single days, obviously there are a couple of double days and a couple where it's not really easy. But in terms of navigating, in terms of there's no Bournemouth and I can't think of Everton, say, where is it? You just don't want anyone.
And even if you look at the days where, like on a Sunday where there's two games, again, there's what we would traditionally say is a standout captain option. If a poll was to go out, it'd be one of those ones where 60% at least voting for the one player that's going to be highly owned. If it's a Kane, a Haaland, a Salah, for example.
Just looking at a couple of teams, obviously Man City. We've all been quite light on Man City recently in terms of effective ownership because they just haven't had the fixtures right. But coming up now from Wednesday, they go on this run. They're going to have 8 fixtures. Nice fixtures. It started with Arsenal, which is obviously not easy. So I've got my eye on a couple of Man City players. Maybe not from Wednesday per se, but definitely from potentially this the following Sunday or something like that. Liverpool in the short term are probably the ones we're going to focus on next, just in terms of they have really good fixtures. Even though City play 3 times, as do other teams in that period, Liverpool have got a 5-for-3 now, over most teams. And I know some plenty jumped on their defenders last week, but let's just have a look at this now. Liverpool defense is a really interesting one. I listened to the Planet FPL pod this week, and I think I think my thoughts are fairly similar to James, but I'm interested, Paul, really in your thoughts on the Liverpool defenders. Obviously, with Trent, with his change in position at the moment, didn't he have something like over 100 passes last week or something, and 2 assists? He's 0.1 more expensive than Van Dijk, and they are both 1.5 million more expensive than Konaté, who looks to have nailed his spot. What's you thinking?
I think I'm usually very good at, if you shouted out a player's name, I would know what their price was on the Sky game, and probably other formats as well, particularly ones where price changes don't happen, like Telegraph. But when I went and looked at Trent, I was expecting him to be cheaper than Van Dijk.
I was as well. I'm the same. Yeah.
So Van Dijk's 10.7, Trent's 10.8. So that initially put me off again, because I was like thinking, oh yeah, like Trent's never been. I know people disagreed with me when I said this about Trippier, but I say the same about Trent. He's never really been like a optimal Sky asset when you had Van Dijk. There was 1 or 2 seasons where Liverpool kept an abundance of clean sheets, and yes, he has had more attacking returns in previous seasons as well. So I did own him in those periods of time, but there wasn't that guarantee like there is with Van Dijk. Starts on 5 points, and hence Van Dijk was always the one to go to in this situation. If he is to play in that role, which obviously did really well against Leeds, probably their performance in the season to date, does it take one bad Liverpool performance to revert back to old ways and go back into the fullback position? That would be my concern. And if I was still going between him and Van Dijk, I think I would pick Van Dijk. Now, on the Liverpool defence, so there's a great tool. It's on the website fantasyfootballhub.co.uk. It's called the Player Comparison Tool. It's primarily used for FPL point scoring system, but it does have the information I'd look for from a Sky perspective as well, particularly around like attacking threat. So we think that Van Dijk's got a much higher attacking threat, at least in my head, subjectively it is. So I went and had a look over the last 6 games where it feels like the back fours settled down for Liverpool. I know there was the one game against Chelsea where rested Van Dijk. Yeah, and it feels now that Liverpool possibly think that they've got a chance, an outside chance of getting top 4 maybe, or at least starting to climb the table. I can imagine them playing a more settled team from now to the end of the season. And I looked at the attacking stats for Konaté versus Van Dijk, and there's very, very little in between them in terms of XG and XGI, so expected goals involvement. I think expected goals 0.18 per appearance for Van Dijk, 0.14 for Konaté. I know Van Dijk's getting more of the passes, but Konaté's picking up more like getting closer to, and picked up the tackle bonus last Monday as well. For that 1.4 million saving, I wouldn't steer clear of Konaté. It feels like there's much more of a decision than perhaps it was a couple of weeks ago, at least in my head.
Maybe even last week in your head, Paul, because I messaged you last week and said, what do you think about Konaté? And you messaged me back with Konaté and the sick emoji. So yes. Just to say, I'm slightly ahead of the curve on you potentially on that one. Just to
well, like I started this piece on, it was more subjectively. Yes, that's how I think about it.
Yeah.
But let's go and have a look at the data, like the underlying stats and underlying data to back up what I think. And does that necessarily go hand in hand? Potentially not.
So I had a quick look yesterday on the hub as well at his minutes, because obviously minutes is the thing which you know, and since game week, it only went back to game week 20, the period I was looking at, but since, and this is FPL game week 20, so I think it's in the last 11 game weeks, he was injured for 4 of them, absolutely, he was injured for 4, but in the other 7 games, he's played 90 minutes in all 7, so he's not been rested or dropped at all. Matip has played 4 games in that period. He played 3 games that Konaté was injured, and he also played the game when Van Dijk was dropped. But that for me, for Konaté, is for me is the kind of story is, if you go with him and he gets dropped, you're just incredibly unlucky, because it looks at the moment like he's nailed. And I think, you know, as you mentioned, he's a 1.6 million saving on Trent, 1.5 on Van Dijk and what you can do. Again, looking forward to the fixtures. There's other players. We're going to want Rashford back in. We're going to want to potentially move our Arsenal players up, which will
goalkeeper upgrade.
Exactly, a keeper upgrade, right? So maybe Raya to Alisson or Raya to Edison or something. There's lots of ways that can be used. So I think at the moment I'm kind of erring that way. Ideally, I'd like to be able to get to Van Dijk or Trent personally, but the 1.5 million for my team anyway allows me to do something I want to do in future, and I don't want to lock myself out. I think as well.
For anyone else that's considering that, I would have a look at accounts like Spion Cop and a few others on Twitter that do occasionally get early team news for Liverpool. And if you're floating around Twitter in the 12 o'clock before deadline, there might be something doing the rounds in terms of early Liverpool team news.
Yeah, we don't get to see the lineups either, do we? Which is a bit of a shame, but good stuff.
There's actually a really good thread that Tom Hartnell, I can't remember if it was through his personal account or through the Golden Goal account, they set up a list of all the well-known Twitter accounts that provide early team news, like accurate early team news. So it's worth having a look at that list. I think it's got like 14 or 15 Twitter accounts on it, but that might help instead of having to set up alerts, which I've done historically when I've been looking for early team news on Man City or other teams.
Good stuff. Looking at other transfer targets that'll be coming, in the next few weeks. I've got like 3 up on screen, right? So we touched on that Leicester against Everton single game day in early May, which is not it's not too far away now, but there's a potential to go in early on Maddison either tomorrow or on Tuesday if you wanted to. 6% owned. Rashford, I said 7% owned. I can see these two players becoming incredibly popular very, very soon. I got McAllister in there, but he's just obviously a placeholder for all Brighton players, right? Because Brighton's fixtures, as Peter rightly says, there's Brighton have still got an extra game to go in. Again ahead of that, Mitoma to me looks so dangerous. March on set pieces, Dunk and Estupinian, and if only we knew who the second centre back would be week on week, they would be a steal as well, wouldn't they? But
like a Colwell or a Webster injury,
one of those,
much more appealing, right?
Yeah, I didn't really realise that the Colwell's on loan from
Chelsea.
Yeah,
because he was ineligible to play against them the last weekend.
Yeah, who else?
What do you think? What do you think about Rashford? Like in that, you're saying there that you think he's going to become increasingly popular.
Yeah.
What happens if he either doesn't play the minutes or doesn't perform particularly well against Spurs? So you've got the FA Cup game this weekend, and you've got Spurs on Thursday night, like next Thursday, 6 days time. Seems like a good hop on point because most of the teams will play during the week.
Yeah.
Then you've got an opportunity to hop on against Villa at home, which is the Sunday afterwards. What happens if he doesn't perform or doesn't get the minutes prior to that? Do you still think that he's as popular? Say he plays 90 in all the games but doesn't score or doesn't assist. Do you still think he becomes popular?
I can't see why not. So they're out of Europe. He's their talisman. They struggle without him. Appreciate he's injured. I don't think they rushed him back. We'll obviously get to see him against Brighton as well, which at the moment is the toughest test as you're going to have, right? So you get to see how sharp he is and stuff. But when he's fit, he plays 90, right? And they're playing... So what are they playing? They're playing Thursday, Sunday, and then they're not playing till the following Thursday, then the Sunday. So do appreciate that they'll have like 4 games in 2 weeks, but he's used to that anyway with Europe and stuff. And when he's fit, he's fit. I just can't, he's only missed a week's worth of football. So, and before he was injured, he was absolutely fantastic, right? He was brilliant. He was 90+% owned. So I take your point what you're trying to say, but I do think away to Spurs is a pretty good fixture. If he was like away to Arsenal or City, I could argue maybe kind of hold off a bit, but Spurs at the moment defensively are absolutely dreadful. And Rashford, is he 8.1 or 8? He's in for the rest of the season, right?
Do you think he's captain potential next Thursday?
I think I prefer I prefer Kane, which is why I kept him personally, because I think
if you don't have Kane and you've got Trippier, would you captain Trippier over Rashford, or if Rashford starts against?
I captain Rashford over Trippier, because I think that Trippier's ceiling is quite low anyway. You know, even though the fixture's good away to Everton, you still feel that, you know, if you get 7 points, you'd be really, really happy. I think with Rashford, with the way he plays, if he gets a goal, he usually gets, like, you know, shots bonus and stuff as well. Away to Spurs, who have looked awful. Yeah, I can just see him being a better option. But I do think Kane against that United defence, without Martinez, without Varane, the way they played last night, they're all over the shop. So I do think defensively, Kane can be the best captain.
So here's another scenario for you. If you were coming off a player on Tuesday night, Watkins, or perhaps you've taken the plunge on like a Crystal Palace player, those that went Eze last week, brilliant differential, paid off really, really handsomely. This is part of at least 3-game move, and they play on a Tuesday night and you can come off. Regardless if you've got a Brighton player or not, and you don't own Rashford, what would be your preference on a Brighton asset away to Forest, and then with their upcoming fixtures, or Rashford away to Spurs with their upcoming fixtures?
I think completely objectively, without looking how the days fall, because obviously Brighton would have a 2-for-1, right? And then you could bring Rashford in for his second game if you had the transfers. So you'd have the Brighton 2-for-1.
I think it's 2-for-2, but yeah,
No, it's 2-for-1. It is. It's 2-for-1. So you get the 2 from Brighton for the 1 for United, and then you could bring in Rashford after. But objectively, I still think I would go for Rashford, just because he's so explosive. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, March, McAllister, Matoma, they've all been superb, and they are superb. None of them really exploded yet in a single game. They tend to share the points. But I think Rashford, as he proved, when you have that single game day a few Sundays ago, I think Spurs were playing West Ham, and he was playing, I can't remember who he was playing, but, you know, he bagged a couple of goals, got brought off early, and he's just that kind of explosive player. So I really like him. I just think he's a fantastic option, a fantastic player. The other player or players I would throw in the mix for that week, for next midweek as well, potentially time to move on to a Man City player. I know they play Arsenal, which is not the easiest, right? But their fixture run is ridiculous. I like Rodri, obviously, you know, he's always going to nail on for bonus. I like Stones as well. 8.9, a bit cheaper. Clean sheet points, even though he's kind of playing in a midfield role. You got to think he's nailed for passing. What do you think on his minutes, Stones? Do you think he gets as many minutes as Rodri?
I'm laughing because I've put a question on you that I'd asked you pre-pod, and now you're doing exactly the same.
I'm asking you live in front of everyone.
You're asking me another one back, right? I'd like to think so. And Stones is somebody that I love owning in Sky when he's fit. I don't know how, if Ake's injury changes anything in the way that they do the inverted fullbacks. I'll be very interested. I don't actually know if Luke Williams will do a thread this week, because of the fact that they're in the FA Cup rather than being a Premier League based, or most people that are interested in FPL read it, I think, is one of the primary reasons for having it. But I'd like to see how they line up this weekend, and if that changes anything. I don't know if Laporte is a direct replacement for Ake and they can continue with the same sort of setup that they've got. It seems to be working obviously very well. Man City's been smashing teams recently. Even a 1-1 draw away to Bayern Munich's a good result for them. So definitely something I'll be keeping my eyes on. I don't know that I would make the move next week. I still think I prefer Brighton or Man United player, knowing that I would hold them through to the end of the season, and that there's likely to be some rotation within City, but I wouldn't steer anybody necessarily against it.
Yeah, no, it's fair. That's a good point. I'm just looking at the time. Apologies, it's 4 minutes to 12 because Sky are supposed to publish their latest transfer numbers at midday, which we're about 4 minutes away from. We'll see if they do. Do you think they do, Paul?
They've been different times recently, so I'll go with no.
Go with no.
I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist, though.
Okay, let's just have let's have a look down the latest transfer averages as of last week. It was the 14th of April. Top 10 went down to 8.4. Top 100 8.8. Top 1,000 9.4. Top 5,000 9.3. Looking at the transfer activity and the changes in ownership for Arsenal players, Liverpool defenders last week, I would like to think that they have gone down a bit, maybe by 1, maybe 1.5, just to squeeze that, forever the optimist. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Paul, on if the average, say, has gone down to 7.5 or 8? What's your thoughts on that? I think to me, looking at what's left, it's a really nice number to have and can comfortably see you through to the end of the season. Would be my initial thoughts.
Yeah, like we mentioned earlier on, I think that the season's relatively easy to navigate, which is a good thing for me, being in a position of consolidation rather than a chase and pack position. And it also means that if you've got more transfers than the average, I think that you don't need to bank on when you bring a player in that you have to hold that player through to the end of the season. Yeah. Whereas if you've got perhaps 5 or 6 transfers, you're really looking to capture all the volumes in those transfers now. So if you're bringing in a Brighton player, you're definitely going to hold that Brighton player till the end of the season, and perhaps even if you're doing that now, knowing that there's blanks coming up, that you'll still retain the volumes thereafter. I'm not as optimistic that they'll drop as much as you, particularly in the higher echelons. And I think the reason for that is that, well, you and I know that we didn't use any transfers last weekend and occupy 3 of the top 10 spots. So yeah, like if it went down 1, then I think that'd be good. But you're right, Martinelli's ownership jumped from it's up at 70%. I mentioned earlier on that I think prior to last weekend and maybe the weekend before, we're starting to think it anyway. After Saka's haul, and then he's only. I'll ask this question to you afterwards. I think people were going to hold on to Saka longer term and would be fearful for doing so. I now think with Martinelli's ownership being 70%, that people would be more allowing to remove Saka from their team and hold Martinelli at 1.4 or 1.5 million saving.
I think interestingly as well, there's going to be a period in the next week or two where the 22.1% of people, the 32.1% of people who don't own Haaland are going to have to bring him back, right? Because their fixture is just insane as well. So that's almost like another transfer booked in for those who already own Haaland. Completely understand people, who came off for this break, maybe going on Van Dijk or something like that. But
you had an abundance of transfers, exactly. Then that was a sensible thing to do, because you don't need to use the transfers like we were suggesting that you might have to have done before, and you can do 3 for zeros.
So looking at the weekend's action coming up, as we know this evening, Arsenal play Southampton, which is, I think when we looked a few weeks ago, this was the point where those who didn't jump off Arsenal a few weeks ago were thinking this is the jump off Arsenal now, with Arsenal's fixtures that are coming up next and the sporadic sort of nature of them. So I've got Zinchenko, who looks like he may not even play, Saka and Martinelli, and captaincy is an interesting one. As you said, I kind of I put it on Saka without really thinking. I hadn't realised that Martinelli's ownership had gone up to 70%. Saka's still on 80%. In terms of looking at the numbers for the last few weeks, if you look at Saka's numbers over the last 6 games, 2-2, 19, 1-1, -1. So that the archetypal player which we talk about sometimes, don't it, where he just doesn't get anything at all. And then you look at Martinelli's form over the last 6, and it's 2, 10, 8, 7, 11, and 5. So very, very different scores. And I know you wanted to ask me, but again, as we're live and I'm the host, I'll pull rank and I'll ask you, Paul, who do you think is the best captain? Because I simply don't know. Really tough one tonight.
Well, there's an incredibly great thread. It's like one of my favourite threads on Twitter about zonal chances conceded. I feel like I'm doing an injustice by not mentioning the Twitter account that I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will put a post up afterwards to recommend that on this chain so people can see it. And had Southampton conceding the majority of their chances down their own right-hand side, which is Martinelli's side. Now, the spanner in the works there is that Maitland-Niles has been playing fullback and is ineligible to play against Arsenal tonight. So it's likely the Pereira comes in and Walker Peters switches sides.
Yeah.
That's kind of flips, like it just changes the whole dynamics of that. I looked at the golden goal poll that they put out. Saka, I think the last time I looked at it, Saka was 40%, Martinelli was 30%. I think Martinelli's a better captaincy option.
I kind of agree with you. I think I agree. Like I think with the ownership the way it was before, 80 versus 40, I think Saka was the safe play. 80 versus 70, I think you've got to look at who you think will score the most points. I don't think there'll be much in it in terms of, even if Saka does really kick off and score a 15-pointer, you've got to think that Martinelli will also score between 8 and 15 as well. But yeah, Martinelli at the moment, I think, just looks the most dangerous. I think since Jesus has been back, he's looked better. Jesus' ownership has increased as well. I think he was in, I want to say 17%, which is high, I think. Would he be your captain if you owned him?
I think if I owned him, I probably wouldn't captain him. But in my position, if I was chasing, I think if I was chasing, I definitely would. Or wasn't happy with my current rank and wanted to take an educated gamble, I think that I would captain Jesus. I class a Hall and Sky as 10 points plus. Saka and Martinelli, any rough guesses at how many times each of them's got 10 plus points this season?
I think that I believe that Saka's had a few. I'm probably wrong. I reckon that Saka's had about, I'll say 5 or 6, and I guess I don't think Martinelli has that much because he doesn't tend to multi-return. So I guess Martinelli has had like 3 or 4. 3.
So you're right on Saka. Saka's had 5. Martinelli's had 7.
7. I wouldn't have thought that. Wow. I wouldn't have thought that. That's interesting. Okay. Martinelli it is, potentially. See the lineup. I half hope on these things, like Saka doesn't start. It just makes it so much easier. Not obviously from a thing view, but it just makes it so much easier, don't it? But yeah. Saturday the 22nd, Fulham play Leeds, Liverpool and Forest. Salah captain, probably, I think nailed on after last week. Leicester and Wolves, Palace, Everton, Brentford and Villa. No late game, obviously, because it's the FA Cup. I suppose the most interesting thing to talk about here is, and we've had questions about it, is kind of hopping off Arsenal, right? So this looks a pretty decent opportunity to hop off a couple, if not all, of your Arsenal players at this point. Depending on how many transfers you've got left. Depend if you want cover for the Arsenal-Chelsea game. Depends if you still think that Arsenal will still continue to play as they have been towards the end of the season, because the fixtures towards the end are decent, actually. But in the short to medium term, there are other teams that have got more and better fixtures, aren't there? So what's your kind of thinking, on all that?
I'm likely to transfer out my Arsenal players for other players on Saturday, other than one player that I'll keep hold of, which is likely to be Martinelli, but I'll need to double check everything, make sure that I'm comfortable not going with Saka, or I've got to route back to Saka if I do want to go back to him. I don't think I'll be going back to any Arsenal players, so I really need to factor that in any decisions I make. One thing I would say, if I had an abundance of transfers, I think a likely move that I would do would be move to a Crystal Palace player. I'm personally not likely to do it. I think I am above average in transfers, but I've got plans for the majority of them and I've been a bit frugal. But if I had an abundance of transfers, I think I'd move on to a Palace player for the 3 games in quick succession. They're on red hot form just now. They play next Saturday, which is a great hop off point back onto teams that have got volumes of fixtures run to the end of the season. And if you're looking for a differential, there's I think all the Palace players would be classed as differentials based on their ownership. So you've got Anderson, Gehi in defence, Elise, Eze, maybe I wouldn't go beyond that. I think those four would all offer decent differentials over that period of time.
I think if you could
I
afford
don't think
it,
it's too late.
I think if you could afford it, which I don't think that many could, unless you were staying off Kane or off Haaland. But I'd be tempted to jump in on someone like Alisson and Konaté and Van Dijk or Trent and really try and smash these next few weeks from the Liverpool defensive side. I think they're going to get passing. I think I can see a couple of clean sheets as well up to Saturday the 6th of May. But I do. I like Eze in particular looks really good.
There's
pick.
5 home games. There's 5 home games and 8 for Liverpool, who have been much better at Anfield than they have been away this season as well. So
good point. And in terms of kind of hop on points there, we've already mentioned potentially Liverpool, potentially Leicester against Wolves. You could hop on to Maddison or whoever else. Iheanacho has looked decent. I wonder if his minutes are going to be more secure now under the new manager. I know James from Planet FPL really likes him. Obviously scored last week. Did he hit the post as well? I can't remember if he hit the post or someone hit the post as well. But he looks decent as well for a hop on point. Moving on to Sunday, Bournemouth, West Ham. There's not many players with kind of high ownership from that game. Newcastle and Spurs gets you the lineup. I think it could be a bit of a battle of Trippier against Kane. Interesting one here, Paul. What's your thinking on that game and captaincy?
With all the talk on Twitter and such, like, I thought that a lot more people were going to come off Kane than what actually did. And that wasn't because I thought it was the right move to do for a Liverpool defender or Liverpool player last week. Perhaps those that didn't have Salah, it made more sense to do. I still think that Kane's going to be a standout captaincy option, and based on a point that you mentioned earlier on, not because Spurs are in great form, not because they're particularly great away from home, and not like there's recency bias as well, because I guess, do you class getting shots here as a blank or not? But Kane getting 4 points at home at Bournemouth, so there's a little bit of recency bias there. But the point that you made earlier on, and we've said often about Trippier, is that he doesn't have a high ceiling. So Kane has a high ceiling, and Newcastle haven't been great defensively recently either. So I think that Kane's the better captaincy option. I'll be captaining Kane. Whilst I'm less cleared on tonight, I'm much more clear on Salah Saturday, Kane Sunday as my 2 captaincy options this weekend.
Same, and looking back at Trippier's last 10 games, his scores in the last 10 games have been 2-2, 1-1, 5-2, 10, 2-2, and 3. Nothing to shout home about. Nothing, and that clean sheet, that haul he had against Man United was a bit unexpected because loads of people captained Rashford that day. They got the clean sheets. He got the assist kind of late on as well. But other than that, he hasn't done anything. 85% owned mine, and I know why, and I still think that he's going to offer a lot of value to the end of the season. He's still cheap. They got lots of fixtures, so I get it. But whole potential there, not for me. Whereas even you look at Kane's last, if we just go back to the same period, Kane's last 10 games. 1, 2, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. We go 9, 9, 2, 5, 7, 2, 15, 7, 8, 7, 4. Massively different. Kane for me all day long, and he's less owned than Trippier as well. Appreciate that Kane's next 3 fixtures are not fantastic, maybe on paper. Away to Newcastle, who have been much poorer defensively lately. Home to United, whose defence is, you've got to look at last night, right? They've got to play Maguire and Lindelof and whoever else. And away to Liverpool, who we've been saying all season, even though you fancy Liverpool for defensive numbers, for passing numbers and the odd clean sheet, they still do concede a lot of goals. And then even after that, Spurs finish with home to Palace, away to Villa, home to Brentford, away to Leeds. I can't at the moment see Kane leaving my team. I've got to be honest. I've been looking at really hard because Spurs look dreadful. But just because Spurs look dreadful doesn't mean that Kane is not going to score the goal from the penalty spot in a 3-1 loss on the weekend, which is, I think, what kind of might happen, for example, this weekend. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that. Just quickly looking ahead to next week, then Tuesday, Wolves, Palace, Villa, Fulham, Leeds, and Leicester. You've got to think Ollie Watkins. I mean, what a player! What the performances. So I watched Match of the Day this morning from last week, man. And I would say the Villa midfield three at the moment are just pulling teams about left, right, and centre. Forward and Ollie Watkins, so much room, absolutely brilliant, and he's on fire. I think we mentioned a few weeks ago how many shots on target he gets. He seems to get like 4 or 5 every single game. He's just absolutely on fire, superb. So I think he'll be my captain on Tuesday. Any opposition there?
Well, the only opposition is how bad Leeds are that any Leicester player could run riot in that game. But based on recent form, like Ollie Watkins just stand out.
But after that game for Villa, is there an argument? Well, there is an argument to come off Ollie Watkins because as sensational as he's been, the fixtures do get a bit more difficult, and more teams have more fixtures over that period. So you can hop off on the Wednesday on the next day. So Forest play Brighton. You can go to a Brighton mid, for example, who have been superb, a really good fixture away to Forest. Chelsea and Brentford. West Ham play Liverpool. Man City, Arsenal. So this game we talk about, it's the start of Man City's run of a really hectic schedule until the end of the season. Watkins I think he's 9 million. You can get to Rodri 9.1, Stones 8.9, maybe sorry, not Ake, he's injured. Akanji 8 million. Whatever else. So in terms of captaincy, Haaland is obviously going to be, head and shoulders above everyone there, I think is probably fair to say. But in terms of moving on players, Paul, do you think that this is a good day?
Yeah, I think so. I think if I didn't need the money, then I possibly wouldn't. But if I need the money for things like a rare upgrade, like what I'm contemplating just now, is that would be the opportune time to do it. There's another argument that you hold Watkins until the following Sunday, and then you use him as your entry point to Leicester player. Perhaps if you're really short on transfers, would be an option there. But I think everything, we've touched on it quite a bit already. There's various different options there, particularly the Man City players, Rodri, the defenders, even Konaté. If you've already got another Liverpool player, perhaps that's an entry point to bring in him, or any of the Brighton players. If you don't own Dunk, I still think Dunk's the best Brighton player to own. But you've got the 3 midfielders. Even if you really needed extra money, even I moved down to either Caicedo, who picked up tackles and passes last week, or Estupiñán. Like if you really need the extra budget and didn't want to move on Kane and you wanted to protect yourself that way, then I moved down there to free up the money to do future moves. Might be beneficial as well.
Cool. And finally, the Thursday, Everton, Newcastle, Southampton, Bournemouth, Spurs and Man United. This could be the entry point back in for Rashford potentially if he starts. We get to see the lineups. And I can't see past Kane personally as captain. We'll get to see how Spurs look on the weekend away to Newcastle. I'm obviously hoping as a Spurs fan, a Kane owner, that Kane turns up and gets a goal, so it makes it easier for the Thursday as well. And I know we touched on this already. So there's plenty of transfer opportunities this week for players you're going to want in for the rest of the season, right? So the teams we're talking about, Man City, Brighton, Man United, have got the most fixtures. They've got the best fixtures until the end of the season. So it's not even like you're hopping on for 3 and then hopping off again. It's just moving on. So yeah, all interesting stuff there. We've had some questions. I think we've probably answered most of them, but let's just have a quick look. Glenroy, is it too early for Buckfast and Pizza Crunch? Absolutely not, Glenroy. Like I say, you Scots are hard as nails. You carry on. FPL Party, Jerong Tang, who is currently splitting Paul and I, so he's currently in 3rd place, says the top 3 players you will buy and keep until the end of the season. Good question. Paul, what do you think?
Players that I'm bringing in to keep to the end of the season, it'll be a rare replacement, which at present, probably likely Ederson, but I wouldn't rule out Alisson or Pope in those discussions as well. A Brighton midfielder, I'm not sure which one on yet. I want to see how Brighton line up with the injuries that they've got. I want to see how they line up against Man United to help dictate which Brighton player I want to get in, which would either be next Wednesday or the following week. And whatever Liverpool player I decide on, defender, on Saturday as well. All other players that I'd be bringing in, if I'm covering the Leicester captaincy, I'd be likely taken back out again. So, those would be the 3 whilst not being very prescriptive on which exact player, there's probably mitigating factors in which I need to consider before which one. But players from those teams in those positions.
Seems Girong is splitting us. Apologies if I've butchered that name, but it seems he's splitting us. I would recommend you get 3 Leeds defenders. That would be the transfers to use at the end of the season. Sam Smith says budget alternative to replace Raya if Steele is now out. I think he's going to be back Steele. I think it was only minor, but budget keepers, Paul? I'm really giving it a lot of thought, to be honest.
Yeah, it'd have to be Brighton. It'd have to be whoever's number 1 for Brighton. I think if you're talking budget, I was going to say, like, after last night, I probably won't recommend De Gea, but Man United did have a lot of fixtures and you could have brought him in. I don't think I class Pope as a budget midfielder, the goalkeeper, but he's in the mid bracket. So if you could stretch to that, I think Pope. But if you can't, Brighton goalie is the only one that really gives any interest to me at present. So if you're looking for something short term to get you through until perhaps a future move frees up money, then Sam Johnson from Crystal Palace, I've mentioned.
Really good show.
Really short-term fixtures, but that would be part of a chain move, and I wouldn't be necessarily recommending it. We run with that to the end of the season.
Steele is now unflagged in FPL as well, so I reckon he'd be fit anyway. Either this weekend or midweek. So you got to say Steele. John O'Donnell asks again about Raya to Edison. I think that's going to be a pretty popular move, and best City defender who gets the most minutes. I think Diaz is probably the best. He's quite expensive, but I think the argument there, Paul.
No, I think he is the best option if you have the budget to get there.
Peter Klein says, "Why don't you two have a little go at the May Manager of the Month to lighten the tone a bit?" All right, there. Mac PMC doesn't have cover for Tuesday the 25th. Would you do Saka to Watkins or Maddison? Either player would be staying till the end. Also, is Konaté worth looking at? Yes, for Konaté, I think he's definitely worth looking at. Doesn't have cover for Tuesday the 25th. Is that the Arsenal and
no, it's Wolves, Palace, Villa, Fulham.
Okay,
Leeds.
yeah.
I think it's hard to say what you're confounded by in terms of team structure and such. Like, I think I would move Saka. If you've got Arsenal cover already, I think I'd move Saka to Watkins and then look to maybe take Watkins out again in the future. Or, as I say, if you don't have budgetary problems, there's nothing against holding Watkins till the end of the season. I don't think I'd be doing it because I'd be looking to free up a third striker spot. It would be more for budget that I'd be doing it.
Cool. Questions off GG Magpie. Again asks about when to move Arsenal players. I think it's fairly reasonable to move off them all this weekend, but maybe leave one for that captaincy game on Tuesday the 2nd of May. And he says, do we load up on Brighton? Absolutely. I can't see any arguments. Like I say, Brighton, Man City, those are the two teams who have, in form, got the best assets, nailing it all. Probably Liverpool again in the short term, the short to medium term. But yeah, you can't have too many Brighton, I don't think, at the moment, in all fairness. Neil Durant, for 8 million or less, would Fabian Schär be the best replacement for Ake? Or should I just bring in a Kanji? I'd be tempted by a Kanji over Schär.
I would
personally
pick, if you're already on Trippier, and this is and you don't think that you're going to need the saving on the money of the 1 million between Schär and a Kanji. I agree. I would pick a Kanji.
But if you haven't got, which is Dunk 7.9? If you haven't got Dunk, obviously go for Dunk, assuming you have got Dunk. But he's the one. Andrew McGill, skipping Leicester versus Everton better than spending 2 transfers on in and out. I personally think so, but you could do it so you get a couple of extra fixtures maybe. If you go from an Arsenal player now onto a Leicester player either tomorrow or Tuesday, you get a 3 for 1. It's an effective 4 for 1 with that Arsenal player being away to Man City. So there are different ways of doing it, and then you can daisy chain on to someone else, potentially Andrew. I think that would be popular. Dale Turner says, with Haaland, Kane, Salah looking essentials, how do we fit in premium defenders? That is a really, really good question. It's really tough, because at the moment, I'm like I say, I'm looking to the end of the season, and there's just no way. Obviously, I'm getting rid of Haaland. I'm going to struggle to come off Kane, I think, due to kind of what I mentioned earlier. But Salah's, Liverpool have got a brilliant 5 games now. Then they have a very short break, but then their final 3 games are away to Leicester, home to Villa, away to Southampton. So you're not going to want to get rid of Salah there either. So those 3 are pretty key, and this is maybe part of the reason why I may have to go for Konaté over Van Dijk. So my answer to that will be, you probably can't get them in unless it's an injury, unless Kane gets injured or Salah gets injured. So it's to maybe look for the next ones down. So for example, I'll be looking at John Stones with Ruben Dias, maybe looking at Ake, etc. I think that would be my answer. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, probably not got much more to add to that, unless you're willing to bypass a Leicester midfielder or go without Rashford to the end of the season. You load up on all the cheaper Brighton options. So you've got Marks, Mitoma, McAllister, Estupinan, like that then frees up the budget to have an additional 1 or 2 premium defenders, but those are the sacrifices that you would have to make.
Cool. Dark Invader says McAllister or Mitoma. It's a tough question, I think.
Have a look this weekend and have a look at how they set up on Wednesday. If McAllister's playing in the double pivot, I prefer McAllister. Yeah. If he's playing further forward, which should lead to more.
I know, it's crazy, isn't it?
His XG is quite high in that 10 position, right? But I think I prefer Mitoma if McAllister's playing further forward, but I prefer McAllister if he's playing in midfield. When he's starting on 5 points, but also has that tackle potential as well, like when he was playing earlier on in the season.
I wouldn't be surprised if he end up with all 3. Like, they're just so good, and it's so hard to split them, and they're so cheap. I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up with all 3 at some point. I don't know.
See the straight shootout. Like, we were talking about Rodri earlier on, and I know that Rodri served us really well elements of this season. Straight shootout, similar number of games. I think Brighton would have 1 more at most points to the end of the season. Rodri versus McAllister, Rodri versus Mitoma. I'm not convinced that Rodri definitely outscores them.
No, I'm not. Earlier in the season I was, but obviously since De Zerbi has taken over and instilled this way they play, and they all play 90 minutes as well. That's the thing. It's not even like they brought off after 60 or 70. Yeah. They all play 90 minutes every single game. And it's horrible going into games at the moment without any of them in different formats, because you just know it's going to be, I don't know, Mitoma assist, McAllister goal, McAllister assist, March goal, March assist, Mitoma goal. It's everywhere you look, isn't it? So I can really, I think I'd prefer them over Rodri, but I prefer Stones over Rodri as well at the moment. If Stones retains that place, I think he could be absolute gold for the running. Obviously because of the clean sheet points as well as everything else. Good stuff. FPL Spartan says no love for Solly March. I think he's probably number 1 pick in all honesty, out of all those. This is in addition to Solly March, I think.
I was only mentioning the other 2 because they were a little bit more expensive. I agree with what you're saying. I think Solly March stands out for me.
Ollie Poole without his blue tick. I'm so sorry, Ollie. He's lost his blue tick. That's such a sickener, isn't it, for those who worked hard to get their ticks. Anyway, what to do with Zinchenko? Is it worth being a Liverpool defender? And he asks around BVD or Trent. Yeah, no, so I think we touched on it. I think you prefer Van Dijk, don't you? Because you just feel that he's going to consistently play in that position because to get the passes.
Marginally, I don't think I would talk it if anyone was like, I prefer Trent or I want a bit of a differential. I wouldn't talk them out of it. I still think Van Dijk's got massive attacking threat as well. So
yeah, same. And this what I mean about if you are chasing, you've got if you still got like 15 transfers left, say. I'm sure I saw someone in the chat earlier had 16. If you could, I'd be tempted to just lump in on all of them for a few games and just see if you can fly it. That's the way to do it, which we've seen in previous seasons, right? Is they only need like a clean sheet or 2, and you're getting 40 points to other people's 10 and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you did that, like I'd said before, they were really good at home. So there's a brilliant hop-off point on Liverpool after Saturday, the 6th of May. From now to then, they play 4 games at home.
Yep, really good point. Colin Johnson asks about Maddison in for the next 3 games. We've kind of mentioned him. The only thing I'd say about Maddison is I do think his numbers are flattering to deceive a little. I expect him to improve, but his numbers, his actual returns, let's say, over the last few games have been absolutely dreadful. I'll grab him now really quickly.
Maddison is the epitome of the 2-2-2, 18, 2-2-2.
Well, if you look at this, so his last, bloody hell, if you go back to 19th of February, 2-0-1-4-4-2-2-2-2. That's his last, whatever that is, 8 or 9 games. It's not great. 6% owned. But if you think he's gonna,
please, don't say he's due or that's going to return to the mean. I'm
much more of a forward thinking, right? So they've changed their manager. They got some decent fixtures now as well. That's my rationale if they go for him, and the fact that he could have a 3-for-1 over Saka. So you would think that you would outscore him regardless, even if he didn't return. Ian Parrins, now that we know the full fixture layout for the remainder of the season, with the exception of the exact order of Brighton, City and Man United and Chelsea, when do you envisage using your final transfer, and why will it be Sunday, May the 21st?
So I would have said that would definitely have been the date that I would do it. But my one concern with it is that you can't see the Man City team sheet on that day. Because you get a 3-for-1 for City over a lot of teams on that day, and I think that's why Ian's highlighting it. But my major concern is that unless there's something that tells us what the City team sheet is going to look like on that day, I'd be a bit concerned about going in blind. There's still a high likelihood that it will be that day.
Yeah, same, I think. And final question from Glenroy, and this is a good question because this is the one which I'm contemplating at the moment. Would you rather bring in Trent or Van Dijk for the foreseeable and skip Leicester versus Everton, or bring in Maddison, move him on? And I think the intimation there is if you bring in Trent, you probably can't afford the other move to get to Maddison. So it's the whole Konaté and Maddison, or just Trent. It's a really good question. What I think a lot will be thinking about.
For Maddison's recent injury record history, and the ability to pick a Leicester player and change your plans prior to the Everton game, I would go with Trent on that basis. If those other factors weren't in there, I would say you're getting 4 games for Leicester to 3 to Liverpool's, and then you've got a decision to make because Liverpool's still got good fixtures after that to redo whatever you wanted to do. So I would go with, to answer the question, I'd go Trent.
Yeah.
And not pick a Liverpool, not pick a Leicester player.
Yeah. It's such a tough one, isn't it? It really is. And it's one of these 50-50s which could define your season either way, right? But yeah, hopefully it won't. That is it for the questions this week. Let's have a quick look at the league before we wrap up. 4 Nations League. Let's go down to 7th and 6th. Liam, 2703, 2708. Dan Cox in 5th, 2787. Ian Parrin in 4th, 2815. I'm in 3rd, 2904. And then Paul 1st and 2nd, 2934 and 2917. Well played, Paul. And then the FFH Members League. Got some names in here. Shane White, Coopers, Troopers, 2845. Aaron Alton, who led for quite a lot of it the season that Liam won, I think, wasn't it? Ended up finishing 4th or 5th. He's up there as well, 2847. As is Glenn Murray, who is in the chat. Well done, Glenn. Good stuff. Kean McKenna, who was also in the chat earlier. Sky Kangaroo, 2851. Dean Hicks, 6th. Barry Moncur is 5th on 2864. Niall Murphy, still flying high, still there, as is David Baxter, 2887. Dale Pointer, just 1 point behind me on 2903 as well. So some plenty good managers there still. There's a long way to go, as we all know. For those who would have listened to the Planet FPL podcast earlier this week, if you don't listen to it, you absolutely should. Absolutely great guys, great advice, good stuff. They did mention on there about potentially us doing a bit of a 4-way trip to Marbella to do a podcast. We haven't gone that far, but we've hopefully provisionally booked something to be able to have a chat with those guys at some point in the very near future. A bit of a mashup between the 3-for-1 and Planet FPL Sky FF, which would be really, really good fun. So as soon as we know a bit more on that, we will let everyone know. But yeah, exciting stuff there. And we met them before, really good guys, and it'd be good to catch up with them again. That is it for us for this week. As usual, thank you also all so much for watching and listening. Your continued support, as usual, is much, much appreciated. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for squeezing the time in this week. I know it's been a tough one both of us this week. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Paul McAnulty 1, MCANULTY. And I have found that thread. So if anyone's interested in the zonal defensive work I've mentioned earlier on, at Gono_FF. So that's at GHONO_FF. Really, really great thread. Probably my favourite Twitter threads that I always look out for on a weekly basis.
Good stuff, Paul. Nice one. My handle on Twitter is at FFH_Fergi. Make sure you drop us both a follow. And if you like what you watched, please press the like button. Remember to subscribe in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. If you enjoyed your listen, please rate the podcast versions. Leave a comment. If you haven't done this already, please do it. Also, go on the Fantasy Football Hub app. Go and rate it. Go on Trustpilot, go on anything, and really big at Fantasy Football Hub. If you anything along those lines. If anyone wants to support us in any way, these things do help us absolutely massively. So please go and do that. I did have one more thing to say, and it's gone. Oh, next week, Paul. I'm not sure yet. I'm supposed to be going away this weekend to Mineheads in Butlins for kids football tour, but my other son isn't well, so I'm not 100% sure if I'll be going or not yet. But I'll let you know if that's all right. And obviously, there's games. Sunday, then Tuesday, I think is right, isn't it? So we've got that gap on the Monday, but yeah, hopefully we can squeeze one in before again. After that, it should be okay for a few weeks, and hopefully until the end of the season. We'll be back next week at some point, looking ahead to the remainder of Game Week 38 and on to Sky Game Week 39. Have a great weekend all, and goodbye for now.